Por favor, que recibamos al doctor Luc Léger.
Hola. That's the only word I say in Spanish. So thank you very much for you all to being there. Before I start, I would like to thank the organizing committee of Ponte 100 program, particularly Professor Juan Jose Palacio, with whom I have all the contact, who invited me here. I want also to thank the sponsor, because without sponsor it's very difficult to organize such an event. So thank you to everyone, also all the helpers. One more thing before I start. Even though I present conference for more than 40 years, I always make the same mistake. I prepare too much material. So I have two parts in my presentation. I will limit myself to the first part, which mainly deals with this topic. So second part, I will just say a few words. But in any way, eventually, the organization will put the conference on a DVD, and it will be available in complete version. So let me start now. I want also to thank, when you develop a test like this one, many colleagues were involved in the development years, people from Montreal, students, and other colleagues. And also there were some people from France, from all over France, Bordeaux, Lille, Clermont-Ferrand, with whom I did my first research on that aspect. And then in Spain, also there were some people involved. And then the last group was from Australia, Grant Tompkinson and Tim Hall. I will present some data about that, okay? So before I start, as an introduction, I want also to point out two studies who will point out the direct involvement of physical fitness with reduced risk and a better cardiovascular profile in later life. Dr. Cole presented this morning the importance of activities, not necessarily very vigorous. And he was right, because if we do only vigorous, people will stop to do exercise and will miss some improvement. But at the same time, it is also true that fitness by itself, the highest level you have, will also bring its own improvement by its own. So as indicated in this review of literature of 42 studies on this aspect, here's another one which shows that there is, with an increase in VO2 peak of 8%, it's also associated by a decrease of body fat by 1.3%. So, and that independent of all the other variables. So fitness by itself is an important aspect to improve the other aspect of health. Okay. I don't know where I have to point that to have it works. Okay, my overall plan is this. As I said, I have two points, two major points, but I will mainly present the first one and just talk a few words because I have too many slides. I won't be able to present that in the period that is allowed to me. So the first point, the importance of monitoring aerobic fitness, there is two aspects. The importance of doing it, but also how to do it, okay? So the first point, the first issue, sorry, it's difficult. Where should I point the pointer? Over there? Okay. So importance of assessing aerobic fitness, that could be done in a performance perspective, okay? And then to determine the athlete level, to set realistic goals and to achieve, and to properly adjust training load, okay? So in a health-related context, on individual basis, we have the same goal, okay? But in addition, at the population level, as in the Ponte 100 program, it could be useful to determine the population fitness level, to make comparison with other population, to assess temporal variation or secular trends, and to adopt strategy to improve population health at school, municipal, or state level, as possible, if possible, in a very integrated fashion, as underlined Dr. Cole this morning. So the next slide will talk about the second point, and after that we'll talk about how we use determination of VO2 to set training load. So I want to underline 3 studies by the same group recently from Australia. Tom Kinson, who was a fantastic graduate student who did his PhD using all the data available in the world with the 20-meter shuttle run. So in the first study, it was done the survey of 55 studies in 11 different countries, okay? And that was done because in these countries, the test was done many times over the years. So it was possible to investigate the singular trends or the change with time. Okay, so on this slide, you'll see the annual rate of change in percentage from 1980 to 2002, okay? The test shuttle run, or the navette, was used since the beginning of the 1980s. Age and gender means for all the country appears in the following slide. Okay, so we can see on this slide in red the curve of the female, and in black the curve of the male for all age group from 6 to 18 years old. And here's the change in percentage. This point here is the 0 line. So in 1980, that was the score. But 20 years after, or over the years, the decrease, we can see all the group, female or not, all the country, there is a decrease, okay? And the mean decrease was 0.4 minus 0.43% per year, okay? So this is what the data that we have, and I want to stress one point, is that with 0.4% per year, it means 80% drop over 20 years. So it's a huge change, decrease in fitness, aerobic fitness of child and adolescent over the last 20 years, okay? And we saw on the previous slide that the decrease was more important in the older group, rather, in adolescent rather than children, okay? Also, the secular drop is not the same for all the country. Okay, so we can see it here. It means that the 0.43% decrease is an average for all the 11 countries. But we can see that some countries do better than some other. So the 0.4 could be an interesting point to do comparison, but we must be aware that not all the countries behave the same way. So it would be interesting in Mexico over the years how the change in fitness what will happen over the years, hoping that a program like Ponte All 100 will counteract this decrease that we see a little bit everywhere in the world. So the second study is more a picture of the aerobic fitness using 20-meter shuttle run. It was done on 109 studies over 37 countries with a total population of 418,000 children and adolescents. Here's the result that we have. Sorry, I have difficulty to change the slide. Okay, now that's the overall picture. We can call that international norms for the year of 1999. This is the median year for all the study being done between 1980 and 2002, okay? And this is the picture that we have. We have the average value with the standard deviation for male and female. So that's an overall picture if we want to make comparison with the rest of the world, okay? So one point that is important to see, that study was done and was published in 2002, up to 2002, and published in 2003. But since that time, there is a few years, and we are in 2014 now. So if we extrapolate the decrease with the rate of 0.43% per year, up to 2014, the decrease will be even more important. The value that we have on this figure may overestimate the 414 value by 6%. So that could be a point to bear in mind when we compare today's data to this set of international data. Okay. So how Mexico perform for aerobic fitness? Okay. To the rest of the world and to other Latino American countries. I'm sorry, I have difficulties. Okay, well, up to now, Mexico data were almost inexistent. Fortunately, hopefully, the All Ponte 100 program will rectify that, okay? For other Latino American countries, however, there are many studies. We can see it here. If we go by the north, Colombia, 2 or 3 studies. Suriname, 1 study, quite old, 1992. As it was the case in Bolivia, 1992. Brazil, about 4 studies starting in 1999 up to 2006. Chile, many studies from 1998 to 2013. Argentina, 2012. So that's the picture now in South America. And for Mexico, okay, we hope the data will come and could be added to that set of data. But still, okay, the Professor Juan Jose Palacio Bochard gave me some hint in an email when he invited me, saying that on the average Mexican lasts only 3 or 4 minutes, and 3 or 4 minutes, it's about 9.5 to 10 kilometers as a maximal speed in the 20-meter shuttle run. Okay, and if we look at the male data for Latino American country, first in red is the world data, the slide I show you from the Australian review of literature on 100 countries. Okay, all the other lines are Latino from South America. Okay, if we can see that all the Latino are below the world average. Okay, of course it's an average. Some country from Scandinavia and even Australia score above that line, but Latino country seems to be behind. Okay, and with 2 or 3 minutes for Mexican, it's located here. It seems similar for the moment. It's previous information to other Latino American countries. So we have similar data for female, and I hope these data could be useful to the people here so they could compare Mexican data to the other Latino American country. Okay, now I've been talking about the lower part. Okay, this is done to compare population, which could be useful to, as I said, to adopt strategy, which Montreal wanted to try to do. And at the same time, now I will try to talk about the upper aspect, okay, this point here, okay? So, assessing aerobic fitness to better set training load. Normally, we train at a set percentage of VO2 max. For example, it's an example. I will tell you at which intensity you try. It's all depends on the objective that you want to achieve, okay? I will just give some example. And as Dr. Cole said this morning, who knows at which percentage you are? Nobody has a watch. Okay? Since a watch telling you, nobody has a watch when you run, say that you are at a set percentage. Maybe it will come with the years, but we're not yet there. So we have to rely on heart rate or speed equivalent, okay? So on heart rate, we say training at percentage of maximal heart rate. And maximal heart rate could be either, I'm sorry, it does not come fast, either be predicted using a formula like 200 minus age or any other equation, okay? Or heart rate, maximal heart rate could be, truly measured during a test using a cardiofrequence, a sports tester or other device, measure really the real maximal heart rate. And finally, you can train not in percentage of maximal heart rate, but in percentage of the speed corresponding to VO2 max. So that's three different approaches. And now I will talk about the first one, using an equation like 200 minus h or any other. Right now I tell you no, you cannot use a formula like that because they are too large systematic and random error, as we can see in the next slide. I have 2 or 3 slides. The first one's indicating the heart rate in the y-axis as a function of age. I said the heart rate, maximal heart rate in the y-axis. We have in red the line of corresponding 200 minus age. And the other line were obtained on 117 males from 6 to 50 years old. The one in blue is the curve for treadmill, and the one in pink is the curve for ergocycle, okay? So we can see a few things on this slide. First, I want to say this is a pair design. So all the 170 subjects did 2 different multi-stage tests, the same subjects on the 2 ergometer, okay? And we can observe that the treadmill maximal heart rate is higher than the one observed while we do cycling. And it means that if you train doing running or train doing cycling, you don't train at the same heart rate. It has to be different heart rate, okay? And if you look at the 200 minus age, everyone is using that formula. But was it put for cycling or running? We use it for both, and we know now that we cannot use it for both, okay? We know also that it's not accurate. We can see the red curve introduce systematic error. The slope is much more important. In fact, 220 minus h means that the heart rate decreases exactly for 1 beat for each year of age. It would be a real hazard that's happened like that. In reality, the decrease is more like 0.7 beat or here 0.6 beat approximately for each year of age. So the heart rate decrease a little bit slower according to age. But what's more important, and the figure don't show that, it's not systematic error, it is the random error. Look at the following slide, it's very important. Okay, here's not only the average curve, the line on the treadmill, okay? We have data here for the treadmill, I'm sorry, it does not move, okay? And we can see above the standard error of the estimate. So this is about the average error around this line here. So this is 10, this is 9. So the data on the average varies about plus or minus 10 around this line. On the average, it means that some individual varies more than that on either sense. But anyway, it's a large variation. We can see it from another point of view. So here we have a 45 years old subject with his real heart rate who has the average heart rate of a 10 years old subject. Okay? Next example, now we have a 13-year-old subject who has an heart rate equivalent to the average heart rate of a 40 or 50 years old subject. And in the middle, we have subjects from 6 to 50 years old that have the same heart rate, this whole range of heart rate. So there is no equation that could give, no single equation is valid. Everyone is using equation like 220. Not only systematic error, but it means nothing. We say to a person of 20 years old, his maximum heart rate is 200 minus 20 is 200. While in fact it could be at 160 or at 240. So it's important to be aware of that, okay? Because if you use that blind in a blind fashion, you could overtrain the person who undertrain the person, okay? So what does it tell is if no equation is valid, is here's the figure with the ergo cycling compared to both, and we can see that on the average, cycling has about 8 beats lower than treadmill. So normally we train at the set, as I said, percentage. We just talked about the heart rate, any formula. Now I'll talk about a better approach is really measuring the heart rate in a multi-stage test. And the 20 meter, for example, since it's the test you'll use here. So it's really better than the other approach, but it's not perfect, as I will show in the next slide, okay? So, sorry, okay. Here's another, the same group of data. Slide is not perfect, but it shows the heart rate in percentage of maximal heart rate as a function on the x-axis as a percentage of VO2 max, okay? And we can see this is the identity line, which means if both values were equal, all data will fall there. This is average curve, okay? Not much difference between male and female, but between 6 years old and 50 years old, it shows that for a set value, let's say 80% of VO2 max, then for adult, it corresponds to 80% here of maximal, and for children at much higher. In other words, for the same goal, same percentage of VO2 max, the children should train at a higher percentage of their maximal heart rate. In both conditions, we can see also that the maximal percentage of maximal heart rate is always higher than the percentage of VO2 max. In other words, both values are not the same. We should not think that 80% VO2 max corresponds to 80% maximal heart rate. That was also pointed out this morning by Dr. Cole. Oh, sorry. Okay. So I said you cannot equate both. And the formula, the one I just gave you is here, if it could come. And this is one approach. It's a regression approach to compare percentage of maximal heart rate corresponding to percentage of VO2 max, taking into consideration the age of the subject. That is a bit unique, okay? The other approach that is commonly used, and it was also pointed out this morning by Dr. Cole, is the Carbonin formula, often called the heart rate reserve, okay? The heart rate reserve is the difference between maximal heart rate and the heart rate at rest. We call it like that because, in fact, in reality, the heart rate could vary only from the resting level to the maximal level. It cannot go to 0%, okay? So instead of taking percentage of max heart rate, we take percentage of the reserve, which is the difference between max and resting. Then we assume, and it works quite well, that percentage of the reserve corresponds to the percentage of VO2 max, okay? Otherwise, in other words, you can calculate the percentage of reserve being 100% of the reserve, okay, divided by the reserve. Here I made a mistake. I corrected in the DVD that you will receive. It should be exercise. The heart rate at exercise, it's here. The heart rate at exercise divided by the reserve, okay? So there's the error we can understand. If during exercise, if suppose your max is 200, during exercise you get up to 140. So within the reserve, you increase by 70 beats. And the reserve is 200 minus 80. Then the reserve is maybe 200 minus 80, 120. So 70 beats during exercise over the overall reserve of 120. It's give you the percentage of the reserve. So this is the way it's computed. And these approaches are two approaches that are better to use than using the formula like 200 minus H. Still, this is average curve. Individuals sometimes behave differently. For example, we could have two individuals with the same maximal heart rate, okay, about 200 in this example. Not only they have the same maximal heart rate, if we use the equation that we have given you before, Carbonin or the other, with the same maximal heart rate, if you want to train at 80% VO2 max, you will get the same percentage of maximal heart rate. And since the maximum heart rate is 200 for both cases, you will get the same training. While in fact, it could be different. Some individuals have the same max, but at the lower percentage, they have different value. And moreover that, sometimes the curve is not linear. The formula assumes the relationship is linear. So if the relationship is not linear, we introduce error. So the best way to do that, to take that into consideration, is to not only measure heart rate at maximal load, but to measure it at every stage or at different intensity and make the individual relation and use these individual relations. Okay. Sorry. So I finished to talk about that, okay? But it's not all, okay? Sometimes you want to train a percentage. We said we don't have a watch telling us a percentage. If you want to do it as a function of the speed, one way to do it is to use the following equation that comes from a review of literature we did in 1984 that was later confirmed by Hall and colleague in 2004. They compare all the equations available in literature, and they support our equation for running outside, and the speed corresponding to VO2 max is the VO2 in milliliter divided by 3.5. As simple as that. So, for example, you do that, and then if you want to train at a set percentage, or percentage of the speed corresponding at VO2 max, then all you have to do, for example, I'll give you an example. If your VO2 max is 35, okay, it's not very high, but it's an example. Then the speed at VO2 max will be 35 divided by 3.5. It means 10 kilometers. That's your maximal speed at VO2 max. Then if you want to train at 70% times 10, it means 7 kilometers per hour. So that's an easy way to transfer the data of the 20-meter shuttle run. You have a VO2 max. You calculate the maximal forward speed, okay, because in the shuttle run you go back and forth. But when you train, you normally use forward running. So you will train, for example, at that speed if you want to train at 70%, okay? So that's one way to do the thing. Such an approach obviously depends on the exactness, not only of the equation that was used to predict VO2 max from the test, okay? For example, you all use a 20-meter. We have developed an equation that predicts VO2 max. But some papers do not support that equation. In fact, I don't have time now. Well, maybe I will have time to talk verbally, but it was in my second part. But some people bring other equations that give completely different results. So instead of saying your VO2 max is 35, it may say it's 40. Then your training speed will be different according to the equation. So that could be a problem, okay? And the same problem is true also for the equation used to predict the forward running. I tell you to divide by 3.5. On the average, and the literature, it corresponds on the average. But some study will say it's not like that. So who is right? It's difficult to say who is right, okay? Another approach that could be used is to find the equivalence between the speed achieved at the end of the navette and the speed achieved at the end of a regular multi-stage test using forward running, okay? So we have devised a test like that before the shuttle run, and the test is a 2-minute stage, initial speed of 7, and speed increment of 1.5, okay? So that test measures the maximal speed, okay? And now we use, in fact, many subjects did both tests. So we have the maximal speed in each test. And with regression analysis, we were able to find the equivalence, okay? And that without any need of any equation, no prediction in the O2 cost. We do it only from the speed data, okay? So the equation that we obtained was speed max, forward running speed max, is equal to this equation times the shuttle running speed, okay? So that was obtained on from 1989 to 2005 on 348 physical education university students, okay? Similar results recently were obtained by Garcia in Argentina in 2012 to 2030, okay? So the equation is there to find the equivalent speed, and from a graphical point of view, this gives the result, the maximal forward speed in y-axis as a function of the shuttle run or the navette speed in the x-axis, and we have the same equation on the graph here and the data here. Again, an equation is always an average. We can see there are variation on each side. So we always have to adjust a little. Don't believe entirely on the equation. Some individual will have to run a little bit faster, some a little bit lower. That you can adjust it. If you use the average and you find your subject is running out of breath, it means that for him the equation is not very good. The same with any heart rate formula. If you take, whether you use 200 minus H or any other formula, carve out in or another one, and you see that your children or your subject is out of breath, or run like it's very easy, probably the intensity you have calculated underestimate or overestimate the training intensity. If the training intensity is too high, it will lead to overtraining. If it's too low, it won't have any training effect. So that's things we have to consider. Any physical educator should be aware of that and should not be afraid to adjust the load based on simple things as the breathing rate, okay? Okay, it's not enough to find the intensity. We should ask also how long we can train at that intensity, okay? The difficulty of a training session is a combination of intensity and duration, okay? So overall train and load is a product of intensity and duration, okay? On this slide here, on this slide, if a person has a VO2 max of 50, 100% of its maximum, you want to train at 90%, which corresponds to 45, this person, if he runs as long as possible, we call that the limit time, okay? He could run at this intensity for 53 minutes, okay? So that is the maximum. There is no way he could train at this intensity longer than that. And if you train shorter than that, it will be an easy training session. But here it would be a maximal training session. You don't train a person at this intensity every day. It will lead to overtraining. So sometimes you could have hard training sessions, sometimes easy, sometimes medium. So you always have to stay below this maximal training load. This is maximal. If you want to train at 40 or 80%, this maximum would be here, 100 minutes, okay? So there is a curve like that. We call that an endurance curve or limit time curve, okay? So here it's a schematic. It's not the real data, but it shows the point. Here's the 100 curve. And if a person wants to train at this intensity, and if he does it for 50 minutes, it would be quite easy or medium training session corresponding to 80% of that curve. At the same intensity, if he trains much longer, then it will be a much more difficult training session. So training has to be two aspects, the intensity and the duration of the training. Okay, one more point I want to show is that the relationship between the training intensity and the duration is different if we use the intensity in percentage of VO2 max or if we use it in percentage of aerobic speed, okay? In percentage of VO2 max, the intensity or the endurance curve is the same for adults and children. But if you use the aerobic speed, because the children needs more energy, their VO2 is higher at the same speed than an adult, then we have a situation like this one. In other words, for the same duration, the children should train at a lower intensity in percentage of the maximal speed than adult, or on the reverse, for the same intensity in percentage of aerobic speed, the children will train shorter time than adult. They are not able to train as fast, as long as adult. I could give you an simple example. A father and the children having the same VO2 max, It's very frequent. The VO2 max in milliliter per kilo is sometimes quite high in childhood, similar to adult. But from a functional point of view, due to this aspect, the children cannot follow. They have the same VO2 max, but they cannot train as long as their father. They can to dig together. You cannot give them the same training. So another point for those who are working with athletes, it's not important in the general population, but we must be aware. Here is real case of two runners, a middle distance runner, 800 meter, and a marathon runner. We asked them, we have data on these two runners, their best performance from 100 meter to the marathon. But we can see that the middle distance runner on short distance do better performance, their maximal speed, while the marathon is doing lower speed. On the reverse, above 150 meter is the reverse. The marathon runner do better. And I forget to tell you, both runners have the same VO2 max and the same speed at VO2 max. Okay? So both runners have the same speed, but they don't have the same duration. They cannot maintain it at the same duration because they have different training specialty. So if you train someone at higher level, the best thing to know is to do an individual curve using value at on different distance. We have individual curve and use these data to set the training duration. So two runners with the same VO2 max or same aerobic speed do not necessarily train at the same intensity for a set duration. Okay, so coming to the importance of aerobic fitness, how to assess aerobic fitness. Okay, how? So direct VO2 max assessment. Okay, we have picture versus indirect. First, direct VO2 max. Okay. It's costly, sophisticated metabolic material, and highly trained personnel is required. It is ergometer and protocol dependent. Know a few studies, but a student of mine did his master on that, and we have the same subject did a multi-stage test with the same incrementation, but the stage lasts 30 seconds, 1 minute, 1 minute and a half, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and 5 minutes. And we saw that depending on the duration of the stage, the VO2 max, if the stage are too long or too short, they don't achieve the same VO2 max. And it's documented in the literature. We must know that the protocol will influence the VO2 max. I'm saying the measure of VO2 max, but it will also influence the predicted VO2 max. If we think that the final speed is corresponding to VO2 max, thus we multiply final speed by 3.5, but shorter are the speed, the subjects could do more stage and achieve higher speed. So the longer the stage, the final speed is shorter. And if we always think that corresponds to the maximal speed, it will result in different VO2 max according to the duration of the stage. So we should need some normalization, okay? So that's the one point I want to say. Another point, another study we did, it's also equipment dependent. What I mean by equipment is mostly the metabolic card, the system used to measure VO2, okay? In one study, one of my PhD students have middle distance runner living in Montreal, another group living in Quebec. So we make an arrangement with the Quebec people, the subjects were tested there. But the point is that the group of distance runner in Montreal had better performance. They achieved higher speed on the treadmill. But surprisingly, they got 10 milliliter of oxygen measured with metabolic card, and each of lower. So we question ourselves. We send 5 subjects, okay, when we measure the same subject in both labs, 10 milliliter difference. Both labs believe it's a gold standard, and we publish these data with a metabolic card, okay? We did the study further. We sent a team of 5 subjects in 5 different labs, different value everywhere. So that's quite interesting. There was a certification program in Canada to test elite athletes from all over the country. So a team was going all over the lab with the same subject, testing them all over. they cancel that program because they have so many different values in each lab for the gold standard measure. So we can say that VO2 max in the lab is the best measure. I have some doubt about that. If you do an indirect field test, there's no problem. People achieve that speed. You can achieve, this is the speed. Do you have to transfer it in VO2 max unit? We know that speed is proportional to VO2 max. Every study will show that. But every study will come with a different predicting value, equation. But the speed is a real indicator. So the result of the shuttle run, per se, the maximal speed, or the stage number, or the laps, says exactly what's the result. If you use the stage number, you must be sure that you use the same protocol. Some use a different version of shuttle run. The best thing is to use the maximal speed at which the subjects stop the test, okay? So field testing, there are different type of tests, distance tests like the 1 mile walk test, one quarter of mile, 300 or 600 meter test, the time test, per 12 minutes, the 6-minute walking test, multi-stage test like the 20-meter navette or the 10-meter and 15-meter navette, okay? Which one? That's not so important first. The important issue is that we have valid, reliable, widely accepted tests with a lot of normative data so we could make comparison. So that should be the thing. First, the distance test. Here's the result sheet I took for we call it the National Fitness Award, okay, in the US, okay? And this is the reported result for the percentile 50. Correspond to the average, okay? For boys and girls, for each age group from 6 to 17 years old, for all the tests, okay? Let's concentrate on the aerobic test, this part here, okay? And we increase it in size. So here we have the boys, the age group, okay? And here's the 50 percentile for the 1 mile race, 1 quarter of mile and half mile. In other words, they suggest to use a shorter distance for the 6 and 7 years old and half mile for the 8 and 9 years old, okay? If we look at the result, based on the test duration, okay? So we can see it for the mile run, for boys 10 to 17, and same for female. We have time between 7, 9.5, 10, and 11. So based on this duration, we are almost sure that these tests are mainly limited by aerobic factor. But for younger children, we're using the 1 quarter mile and half mile. The test duration is about 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes. So with such duration, we can question, are these tests limited by aerobic capacity or by anaerobic? Okay? So next slide by Tompkinson shows the anaerobic contribution, okay, the percentage of anaerobic contribution as a function of time to exhaustion. And this is the kind of curve that we have. What we can see on this curve is the anaerobic contribution. For example, for tests lasting less than 3 minutes, okay, here, the anaerobic contribution is above 40%. For tests lasting less than 6 minutes, the anaerobic contribution is above 25%. That's important contribution. And that's decreased the accuracy of the test to predict VO2 max, aerobic fitness, okay? On the other hand, if tests last over than 9 minutes, then the contribution of anaerobic capacity is less than 10%. Then we can say that on distance running or time event that lasts over 9 minutes, we can be almost sure that we mainly test aerobic capacity. Now, should we use time test or distance test? Since the range of performance, we saw that on the table. It lasts from 7 to 11 minutes for boys from 8 to 17. It means it's not the same duration of the test. It's the same distance, 1 mile. But the duration is different. It means that the contribution of anaerobic is not the same. So depending if you are fit or not, You don't test the aerobic capacity to the same extent. And that was for the centile 50. We know that some are in the 20th centile, some at 80, so it's a bit more range, and that's affect the distance test. The time tests are to be preferred because they are not subject to that bias. They always solicit the same percentage of aerobic capacity. Now, time tests or multi-stage tests? I do have a preference for multi-stage tests. Okay, not because I designed the 20-meter test, but because multi-stage tests are progressive, safer, easier for the subject to manage his effort to his own capacity, particularly in the young subjects, even though I must say that 6 years old to 7, they have difficulty from intellectual point of view to understand the load, and it's very touchy at this age to measure the capacity with any kind of test, okay? Good reliability at validity is widely acceptable, feasible with all age group, thus enabling age comparison, and there are many normative studies. Also, it's easy to test subjects indoor in standardized conditions all season. You all know that in Canada we have snow and very cold temperature, so it would be difficult to do the navette outside in the schoolyard, okay? So that's important. We can do it indoor. Children could be tested easily at school level. It's pedagogically amusing. Children are rarely running for work. They always move in the schoolyard in all directions. So the shuttle run do a little bit of that. If you test the athlete, many sports include stop and go, soccer, basketball, handball, rugby. So this test is a bit more specific to test these type of athletes. Okay. It's also used all over the world, and the Eurofit test battery, right from the beginning. Recent Bio research, I did that last week, on the 20-meter, or using these words, shuttle run and navette 20-meter, find out over 2,000 publication or report using Medline, PubMed, or Sport Discus, okay? So on various topics such as external validation, validity, reliability, normative and comparative studies, it's also used sometimes simply as a tool to estimate VO2 max of different populations. So normative studies are available, as just said. However, even if it's the same test that is being used, many different versions of the shuttle run exist, okay? Many studies, I saw that regularly. We use the Léger test. They quote our reference, but sometimes we know that it's not the test they use. Show that here. Okay. So they use different speed at the same stage because they create their own recording. And they start the test, instead of starting at 8, you could start it at 11 or at 6. So if you count the number of stages, it does not correspond to the same speed and to the same VO2 max. You must be aware exactly which protocol was used. Sometimes they count the laps, sometimes even with the same protocol, they use another equation. They quote my name, but they use another equation, or a table for the pacer or fitness gram, or they use other equation. So that must be important to be aware of that. So, okay, that was my first part. The time is going on, I have as many slides. I will just talk like that, what I have to say about the shuttle run. I could talk about the different version, the development, the point of development at the origin. We tested on different type of surface using running shoes. But we saw that on a caoutchouc type, like Mondo rubber, or in a gym with asbestos tile, we have the same energy cost. Same for female and male. So we use a single equation, whether it is being done on different type of surface, and whether it's male or female. That was very interesting to do that, okay? Another point that I want to indicate is that just put some note here, is that we know that the equation that we divide is sometimes criticized. Many says, have 2 or 3 studies, systematically say it underestimate, okay? But sometimes they quote only the study they want to quote. One thing I want to add on that, if I do a new study to validate the test, I will have value using the real value of VO2 max and the performance in the test. Then they will design a new equation. From a mathematical or statistical point of view, the equation that you will obtain will give you a predicted value that is identical to the real value. So it's normal then to say that their new equation has no systematic error, is better, because it is based on the new value. If I use my original value, which is also based on a comparison with the direct measurement, and use their new equation, I will say the opposite. Your value overestimate. So, of course, one thing is sure. One value is either overestimate or underestimate. The problem is that who is right? I told you, with one study, we test athletes in different labs, we got so much different value. So that's important. We did another survey, and the difference between different laboratories was about 15 milliliter for the same speed. But we know for previous study on VO2 max from all the literature between 1950 to 60 that the variation, inter-individual variation, using the same lab, the same protocol, is about 5% on the average between the subjects. Now we have a difference of 15 milliliter, not between subjects, between studies. For me, it's very clear. The problem is protocol, normalization, and is the system well calibrated? Who has a good technician now to understand exactly what is behind these very sophisticated machines? So I have no confidence in this machine. When we want to have a good study, we go back to the old glass bag study, not using the machine. I have no confidence. As I said before, I believe more in the final speed of an indirect field test. I know exactly what's happening now. You can compare this value. Another point I want to show, in many of these studies, they use gender as a predictor. That's a big error. Most studies are doing that. I'll tell you why. If you take a sample of 1,000, let's say 500 boys, 500 girls, you make a regression and you enter gender as a predictor. Automatically it will become a highly significant predictor. So they include that in the equation. Because it's true. In general, female subject has a lower VO2 max, a lower maximal aerobic speed. Tell you something. Look in the literature on the mechanical efficiency. There is no difference between male and female. So it is very easy to gather a group, let's say 20 girls and 20 males, that have the same VO2 max, that finish the multi-stage test on the treadmill at the same speed. So they have the same speed, the same VO2 max, and the same under maximal value at any speed. So these subjects, in general, what I say is that if subjects finish at the same speed, they have the same VO2 max, whether they are male or female, okay? But these subjects have the same ability. There's no difference according to gender. If you make an equation, gender won't be a predictor. If you now use an equation that was developed with a random sample using male and female, of course gender will be a predictor, and it will yield in general 5 milliliter of oxygen less for female, even if they finish at the same speed. If you take the same 20 subjects and female at the same VO2 max on the treadmill at the same maximal speed, and you predict their VO2 max with this equation, all the female will have underestimated value by 5 ml. So female should not be used. It's misunderstanding what is happening from a statistical point of view. But everyone is doing that. If you look at the equation in the literature, they all include gender. So it's a mistake for me. So that's important to have that in mind. And more important, as I said before, don't put too much emphasis on the value of the predicted VO2 max value, because there are so much difference between the literature. And I must say that difference, but half overestimate or underestimate. Who is the right? I don't know. But the key issue, use the maximal aerobic speed, the maximal speed obtained during 20-meter shuttle run, as the final point, the point you compare result to other country and to step training load, okay? To have a gross estimate of VO2 max, you can use an equation, but always use the same equation. So that's all I have to say. I want to thank you for your attention.